Welcome to Crime Most French, a weekly podcast taking you through intriguing cases carried out on French soil. Researched and narrated by Cedric and rudely interrupted by me, Melanie. We're the true crime podcast All the Lions. Crack open le vin and let the mayhem commence.
Today's episode takes us to 1914. We are going to look at the assassination of Gaston Calmette, who was the director of the Figaro, which is one of the main three newspapers in France, by Henriette Caillaux, who was the wife of the finance minister at the time.
I'm always amused that it's only the low-level people that get killed. It's the moment you gain any notoriety and you're murdered, you're assassinated.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know what the difference in definition is. It might not be any, I don't know.
If somebody came in and put a gun and put a bullet in my head, I would be murdered. I wouldn't be assassinated.
Well, I guess assassination implies a plot, maybe?
There was some kind of targeting, yeah. But even though, you could still take out the hit on somebody. You're not necessarily going to assassinate them. But still, it's just an interest in semantics, that's all.
Okay. On the 16th of March, 1914, Henriette Caillaux does what the major minister's wife does most days. In the morning, she calls her hairdresser and asks him to come at about 7 p.m. to get ready for a dinner later that evening, an official dinner. At about 11 a.m., she has her nails done by the usual manicurists.
Okay. She obviously has a hard life.
Yes, but she wasn't working.
No.
And at the time, being a minister was very prestigious and very important, so the wives had to be nice and...
Trophies.
Yeah. Then she goes to the dentist.
What? Who's going to be checking her teeth like a horse at the party?
I don't know. She decided she didn't do the whole thing done.
Okay.
So her treatment isn't finished, so she agrees to come back 2 days later in the afternoon. As she leaves the dentist, Henriette goes and sees her husband at the ministry. Mm-hmm. And then she goes home. They both go home for lunch.
Okay, of course. They're French. Everything stops for lunch.
Well, yeah, you go home for lunch. That's what you do. In the car on the way, they discussed, like every day for the last 3 months, of the negative campaign the Figaro is running against him.
Oh, I see.
Gaston Calmette, the director of the Figaro, has a very clear goal, which is to stop the policy the minister is trying to implement. The minister is hated big time by the right because he has a kind of left policy. Okay. But also he has some ideas that are quite new and a lot of people don't like. He's been MP since 1898.
Okay, so quite a while then.
Yes, at that point it would be more than 20 years. He's been finance minister several times already. He's even been president of the council, which is the equivalent of a prime minister now. Okay. He was between December 1911 and January 1912. So not for very long, but he's been president of the council.
So he was definitely a mover and shaker in the government.
Yes. By 1914, he's known for two things, mainly. He's known for an appeasement policy with Germany.
Well, that went well.
Yes, he has negotiated some compromise with Germany, which is that in exchange for freedom of maneuver in Morocco by France, the Germans obtained some territory in Central Africa. He, at that point, by 1914, even considers closer relationship with Germany, and he's totally opposed to the lengthening of the military service to 3 years. At the time, it was 2 years, I think. Okay. And he wanted to make it 3. She didn't want to make it 3, but the left wanted to make it 3. And he's also known for having devised the first income tax in France.
Boo! Well, I instantly don't like him.
Yeah, and he's planning to add high gain income tax as well for high income. Yeah. And he likes to tease people saying that he gave France a modern taxation system.
Okay.
So it's a bit cocky as well.
The powerful earn a lot of money, so that he's not going to be popular with them at all. Yes. Yeah.
So pacifism and fiscalism, you can imagine how much he's hated by a large part of the country.
Yes, and in particular, Le Figaro, who's particularly right-leaning.
Yes. He's elected in January 1914 leader of the most powerful party in the country. It's the Radicals at the time,
Okay.
which have disappeared now. They don't really exist anymore. It's the centre-left.
That's it. The thing about France is the spectrum of ideologies, political ideologies, is much wider than, say, the UK and the US. It's all quite. It seems quite centrist when you look back at when I look at the UK from the perspective of France, and when I vote in European elections, there are so many parties, and the spectrum is so wide from extremist left Marxists to all the way to Marine Le Pen's fabulous party, who will remain nameless. I'm always amazed that the French are very involved in politics. They like to have their voices heard, as you can see with people demonstrating in the streets even this weekend about the vaccine passes. The French, they like their politics and they're very involved in it.
There used to be a lot more parties because the main groups now are coalitions. They're super parties.
Yeah.
Like, for example, what was the UDF? I don't know what it's called now. I think it disappeared as well. It was absorbed by the RPR. But the UDF was a group of 120 parties also.
Wow.
On the left, same thing. When the Socialist Party was created, it absorbed a whole bunch of parties that existed at the time.
Yeah.
But there's also strains that have completely disappeared, like the Mountaineers, for example. They were called Mountaineers because they were at the top of the seats.
Oh, I see.
So they were called Mountaineers because they had to
They
go
weren't
up.
actually physically mountaineers.
They had to just climb all the stairs to get to their seats. So.
Oh, I see. The nosebleeds. That's what they probably would have been called. But there isn't the same kind of financial barriers to entry in French politics as there are. So I think that's why it's quite as wide, a wide spectrum as it is.
Yes. You don't need much to have a party running. Yes.
No.
So yes, he's elected leader of the main party in France in January 1914.
Okay.
And it is expected that for the general elections in April, his party and Jean Jaurès' Socialist Party, which would have been SFIO at the time, would coordinate and take power.
Uh-huh.
So that would have been, for the first time ever, a left party in power in France. So that's what's expected to happen.
That's funny because I think that's kind of like not too far away from when the Labour Party got into power in the UK as well. After that kind of like post-revolution, industrial revolution, then the workers suddenly started gaining power, and then this Labour Party popped up. So I wonder if the same thing happened in France. I don't know.
Could be. Don't know. I don't remember. The two were seen having lunch a few times, so that's how people decided, that's what they're going to do. They're going to all coordinate and take power.
Yeah.
So that's another reason why he's hated by the right, because he's plotting to take power.
Yeah.
Henriette Caillaux's husband, the finance minister, called Joseph, has a personality that doesn't help as well. He's hated by everybody else. He's very, very arrogant. He's full of himself, and he's unbearable to his opponents, and he's very annoying to his supporters. So even on his side, they don't like him. He says of himself, millionaire in the crib, son of a minister, finance inspector after brilliant studies. At 35, I entered the chamber.
So he certainly didn't come from the streets then.
No, he was rich.
Yeah.
He was rich and full of himself. His moustache, he had a moustache, it was like gelled, like you did at the time.
Yes.
He wears a monocle for some reason.
Oh my God, what an arse.
And he likes a good word, and the nastier and the more it hurts others, the better. Add to that he likes to show himself with feminine conquests.
Oh God.
And he seems to fear invisibility more than scandal, and you can imagine that's the perfect storm.
Do you know, there's one political leader that keeps popping into my head, not French, but an elitist womanizer, often putting his foot in his mouth, and comes from quite a privileged background.
Yeah, but the difference is Caillaux was clever.
Whereas Boris isn't.
Yeah, exactly. Caillaux was very good at manipulating other people, and he was clever in general.
So he's basically a mixture of Boris and Macron.
To me, he reminds me of DSK, Dominique Strauss-Kahn. Remember, he was accused of, I can't remember what exactly, having affairs and prostitutes in New York and stuff. And he was an ex-finance minister in France, and he was rich, and he was essentially the same person, but 100 years later, or nearly 100 years later.
I see.
So that's who he reminds me of. He's very, very similar to him.
Okay.
The difference is Strauss-Kahn ended up in prison, whereas Caillaux didn't.
Ended up dead?
No, he didn't die.
Sorry, yes.
Minister.
It was his wife that shot. Yeah.
He didn't end up in prison, though kind of came close, we'll see later.
But he's got, to me, it seems a bit weak. You let your women do your fighting for you.
Yeah. That was, we'll see later, it's something that's been mentioned in the trial. Nobody really knows for sure what happened.
Yeah.
But we don't know yet if he's involved or anything.
Yeah, anyway. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yes. He also likes hunting with horses and dogs and...
Oh, he just sounds like my kind of guy.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, when he becomes finance minister on the 9th of December 1913, the war between him and Calmette, the director of the Figaro, is declared straight away.
Okay.
And for the next 3 months, the Figaro is going to publish articles on him, all negative. Somebody counted that in 95 days, 138 newspaper articles have been published in the Figaro. So it's more than one a day.
Mm.
And they accuse him of pretty much everything. It goes all the way from having received bribes, 40,000 francs, for example, for contribution to his political campaign, all the way to having intervened in tribunal proceedings to get his way when I think it was a known gangster. For some reason, he decided to defend and did pull strings in the background somehow with the president of the tribunal, and the guy went free, and nobody expected that.
So he's got shades of Kennedy then, because Kennedy's father was very much involved with the...
Yeah, totally. He has also shades of Kennedy, yeah. On the 10th of March, Calmette decided to go all in, because we're getting close to the elections. The elections are a month later.
So time for the big guns to come out.
It's time to, everything has to come out. So he announces that he's going to publish letters that Caillaux sent to his now wife and other people.
Okay.
These letters were photographed by his ex-wife.
Oh dear.
And given to the Figaro. These letters are potentially very, very damaging to his career.
Yeah. Hell hath no fury, yeah?
Yes. The first letter is published on the 13th of March, 1914, and it shows Caillaux's cynicism straight away. It says in the letter, "I have crushed the income tax whilst appearing to defend it, and I have been acclaimed by the centre and the right, and I haven't antagonized the left too much."
Okay, so it's basically showing all of his cards.
Yes. I can't remember who that was sent to, but yes, essentially he's... In that one letter, he's showing that he tricked people.
Yeah.
He did something while appearing doing something else. Mm-hmm. And he's happy that everybody thinks that he's done something good when in fact he didn't.
Yeah.
And Calmette announces more letters to be published on the 17th of March. At that point, the couple is already ready to crack because there's been 3 months of this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. The letters are really at the end and they're really like all the big guns coming out.
Yeah, the drip feeding over the months and then the deluge.
Yeah. So when they're in the car, they're discussing what other letters does he have because they don't know. Does he have letters that they sent to each other when they were lovers and they were both married, for example, at the time, to other people, obviously?
Oh, scandalous.
Yes. They're more worried about letters about their personal life than letters where he admits that he's just lying and cheating and scheming.
Well, certainly the wife, yeah. I mean, she's going to be losing major face.
Yeah. So he was heard saying that he can't really attack the newspaper for slander because it takes too long.
And by that point, he wouldn't have...
He would have lost the elections, probably.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, he says to his wife, if that continues, I'm going to have to go and punch him in the face.
Punch him in the face with a bullet.
Yes. It's at that point that Henriette said she decided to take action to avoid that, because if that happened, that would be the end of his career. First, on that day, we're going back to the day of whatever happens.
Mm-hmm.
After having had her nails done, she decided to go and buy a gun, and she tested a few in the shop. Apparently, at the time, you could buy guns in shops in France. I don't even know where you could buy one now, but apparently you could just like that. She goes in the basement and does some target practice. And apparently she managed to put 3 bullets out of 5 in the target for the first time. And she decides to buy the one that has the softest trigger, so it's a lot easier to use. And she goes for a semi-automatic. It's a Browning 1906.
I see.
And she paid 55 francs for it.
Wow, that's quite a lot of money.
At the time, yeah, not an insane amount of money, but it's a new gun, so it costs some money.
Well, she's not on the breadline anyway, but I'm surprised. She should have really have done that before she had her nails done.
Yeah, well, because she discussed it with her husband at lunchtime. She did it in that order. So that
presumably
was
that's
early
quite
afternoon.
important then, that she had the lunch with the husband and then bought the gun.
Yeah, they were discussing what was happening. That's pretty much all they were discussing in the last several months. So.
Yeah, well, you would be, wouldn't you?
And that's because he decided that he was going to punch the other guy in the face that she decided to do something about it.
You tend not to need a gun when you're going to punch someone in the face. I have never punched someone in the face, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't involve a gun.
No. So after having bought the gun, she goes back home and she leaves a note to her husband.
Okay.
And that note, she says, "You said you wanted to punch him in the face, but I don't want you to sacrifice yourself. The country and the republic need you. I'll do it for you. I'm out of patience."
Okay.
So that's what the note says.
But she took a gun.
She took a gun, yes. And she forgets to cancel her hairdresser as well.
Oh, so the hairdresser's standing there by the chair waiting for her to have her blowout, as the Americans call it, her hairdo, her hair done.
She arrives at the Figaro headquarters at 5:15 p.m. She was driven by her husband's official driver. She strangely asked him to remove the official government display signs on the car.
Okay.
So...
Well, she's less conspicuous, presumably.
I don't know if it's less conspicuous. I think it might more be that she didn't want it to appear like an official business.
Okay.
So in her head, it was important that it was her own use of the car, and therefore there should be no signs that it's an official government car or something.
I'm not acting in any way with my husband.
Yeah, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
People who see her arrive at the newspaper find her way overdressed for the season, and she has fur sleeves and a coat and a hat, and remember it's April.
And she's got furs
late
on.
March 2014, which was apparently hot. She waits for about an hour because when she arrived, she's told that Calmette is not in the office, which is true. He was away. After she has waited an hour, he arrives. He arrives with the writer, called Bourget, and he receives her, even though he had not planned to see anybody. He was just coming to the office, drop some stuff, and go home. Mm-hmm. So he decides to receive her as a courtesy.
That was a bad move.
They go into his office, yes.
Okay.
So she does a few steps into the office. She announces that she's here because of the mediatic cabal that he's running against her husband.
Okay.
She takes the gun out of her sleeve and she shoots 6 times.
So not much of a conversation then?
No.
And 6 times?
6 times.
Wow.
2 bullets end up in the bookshelves. 1 is stopped by Calmette's wallet. Must be a thick wallet.
Yeah.
1 just grazes him.
Okay.
And 2 hit him. 1 hit an intestine artery and is fatal.
Yeah.
So the newspaper staff rushes in, obviously, because it's 5 p.m., so people are still around. They're getting ready to leave. And they find Calmette on the ground with Caillaux, who declares, since there is no justice in France.
She's going to make her own justice.
Yeah. She doesn't finish the sentence, but she doesn't need to.
Yeah, well, she's gone death wish.
Yeah. So Calmette is moved to his chair, awaiting a doctor. He has time to declare that I did my duty. What I did without hate. Henriette doesn't try to escape. She just stays there. She just stands there doing nothing. When the police arrives, she's arrested. She confesses to the facts, and she declares that she wanted to give Calmette a lesson, and she hopes she didn't hurt him too much. In the meantime, Calmette is moved to a clinic where he dies during an operation, but that operation was delayed by several hours because the staff were debating whether to do it or not. So if they had done it as soon as he arrived, he might have survived, but they waited hours and hours before they decided, okay, we really need to do it, and he died.
I guess the survival rate of operations at that time weren't as high as they were today. So
Well, no antibiotics, yes.
No.
For a start. So,
not wearing gloves and...
Yes. Yeah, it was... Well, maybe there were just no gloves, no. But they were probably starting to wash their hands
well,
after
that's
the Crimean War.
I give them a wee damp underneath
Yeah.
some running water.
But yes, the survival rate was probably quite low, especially when you do it too late anyway. At that point, you must have lost too much blood. To do
debating on whether it was a good idea or not for hours is always going to impact on the outcome.
Yeah. So let's move on to the trial. Henriette Caillaux is tried in July. So it's fairly quick, barely 4 months after the fact. She didn't try to hide anything, so as far as everybody's concerned, it was an open and shut case.
Yeah.
During the trial, her lawyer, who had defended Zola, for example, in the past, so it was a high-end lawyer who had done things, can think OJ here.
Oh, so yeah, I was going to say, is it Cochrane's?
Yeah. He pleads a crime of passion. They decide to completely ignore the beginnings of feminism, and they say that Henriette was overcome by feminine urges. They just play on stereotypes, essentially. They say that it wasn't premeditated. They say that it was uncontrollable. It was a reflex. She didn't think about it. It just happened. Some of the experts they call concur with it. They talk about typical subconscious impulse with a complete split of personality, for example.
Wasn't the fact that she'd actually gone ahead, bought a gun earlier in the day, and then sat waiting a whole hour, which was just probably boiling, and the later it was getting and the more she was kept waiting, it was just right. Perhaps if he had been there and she'd instantly got in to see him, she might not have shot him, but...
Well, that's the thing. That surprised people a lot. That strategy was really surprising. Nobody was expecting it because she had left a letter to her husband after lunch. She had called his driver in the afternoon to get driven to the newspaper. She had bought a gun in the afternoon. Then she had gone to see the newspaper guy. She had waited an hour in his office for him to arrive. You can't call that a crime of passion. It's not.
No.
It's not heat of the moment. It's something that took most of a day to plan.
Yeah, I mean, you could call it heat of the moment with a really long fuse. I mean, that is a long time.
Yeah,
but
that's most of a day.
I think purely by the fact she'd gone and bought a gun that day is just utter nonsense saying she snapped.
Yes, it wouldn't stick today, I don't think. Although after OJ, anything is possible, really. But you wouldn't think it would stick today.
Yeah, if you have enough money and you have a good enough lawyer, then yes, obviously anything is possible.
So the prosecutor, having dropped premeditation, he had agreed to drop premeditation, requests 5 years in prison, which in itself is not much for having murdered someone.
Yeah.
And the jury, after 50 minutes of deliberation, acquits her.
What? Oh, that's insane.
Yes. So you can imagine that the verdict was criticized in newspapers quite a lot.
Privileged white lady gets off.
Yes, but it gets better than that, because after newspapers and other people start digging into exactly what happened, they discovered that her husband had intervened. For example, before the trial, one of his friends was appointed justice minister. Another one was appointed president of the tribunal where his wife is going to be tried.
Lord.
Yeah. A few days before the trial starts, the general prosecutor is given the Legion of Honor by him. That leaves the juror. You would think they still have their say. Well, not quite. The way the jurors are selected is you select a number of names, they're put in a box, and then they're randomly selected.
Okay.
When that box arrived at the tribunal, people noticed that the seals had been broken. So that box had been opened, and the clerk that carries the box said, "Oh, there was an accident in the stairs."
Yeah, sure.
And nobody asks anything about it again. So we know already that something happened to that list of people. There was also the fact that all the jurors were all quite far-right jurors. So we know some inquiries have been done about them because they don't say that. Normally, the jurors are selected from the electoral register. It doesn't say anything about who you vote for. So you know that they picked the names in advance. Then they selected people they knew or they inquired about to know what their views were. And then those interesting names were put back in the box. That's probably what happened.
Oh, good Lord.
And to finish it off, to be really, really sure that his wife is acquitted, he packed the room with Corsican gangsters who were booing anybody saying anything against his wife and clapping everybody say anything in favor of his wife.
Wow.
So it looked like public opinion was for his wife, but they were just gangsters paid for the job.
So you have to think there was certainly smoke and fire. Where there's smoke, given the fact he had contacts with Corsican gangsters.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
So
what a scumbag.
At that point, the outcome of the trial is no longer that surprising.
No.
Given that the justice minister, the president of the tribunal, the jurors, and the room were all designed to be in favor of his wife.
Just a complete and utter kangaroo court.
Yeah, totally.
Utterly shocking.
Yeah. So as a result, she's acquitted. So it's fine. And in the meantime, he had been re-elected MP in April. Because that's after the murder, but before the trial.
Yeah.
He was elected. The acquittal of his wife means that he can continue his political career, which he does for about 40 years. It won't be without hiccups, though. For example, on the 11th of December 1917, the President of the Republic lifts his MP immunity so that he can defend himself against accusation of collusion with the Germans. And that's the military commander of Paris that makes these accusations.
Okay.
So it's not the random person in the street. He accuses him to have colluded with the Germans against Serbia and Romania, which were two allies of France at the time.
Yeah.
So he's arrested on the 14th of January 1918, so that's before the end of the war, for intelligence with the enemy in times of war. So it doesn't look very good. After
that guy
months,
is just rotten.
Oh, it totally is. But he didn't want war with the Germans, so I guess he tried to finish the war somehow. I don't know. I don't know why he's... I didn't see the transcripts of the trial because these were not released, so I don't know exactly what it was about. But there must have been something for the military commander of Paris to make these accusations.
Well, yeah, he was probably privy to information that the public just weren't available.
Yeah, in times of war, the army doesn't release documents normally. So,
no, not really.
Yeah, but in this case, it's the army that made the accusations.
Yeah, wow.
So he's arrested on the 14th of January 1918, and he's tried by the Senate on the 23rd of October 1919, so that's after the end of the war, and the Senate constituted itself as High Court. He's accused of treason and plotting against the state. He is sentenced on February 1920 to 3 years in prison, and he loses his civic rights. But he's pardoned by the president on the 18th of November 1924. So then he disappears for a while, and he comes back again, and he becomes finance minister again, and he then becomes senator.
Wow.
His political career ends in 1940, just after he votes the full power to Pétain, after the start of the war, and he dies 4 years later. Some people have said that without his wife's crime, he could have changed history. It might be romanticized a bit, it might be far-fetched, but because he was so much against the war, people say that his government would have included him and Jean Jaurès, who was also against the war. Mm-hmm. And Jean Jaurès would have probably been made foreign minister, and there's a good chance they would have avoided World War I.
Okay.
It can't be proven, obviously, but people think that there was a possibility that the First World War would not have happened if his wife hadn't killed Calmette. On the 28th of July 1914, we're going back to the trial, his wife is released after the trial, and she emerges from the trial just as the Austro-Hungarian army bombs Belgrade and starts the First World War. On the 31st of July, Jean Jaurès is assassinated on the same year. Yeah. On the 1st of August, Germany declares war to Russia. On the 3rd of August, Germany declares war to France. And the next day, the UK declares war to Germany. And that's the end of the story.
Yeah. And I definitely think the moral of the story is, if you've got deep enough pockets and you're high enough on power, you can literally get away with murder.